Cinnamon Toast Crunches.
So you guys would actually rather watch the video than listen to Dan talk? Well, unfortunately, you can't stop Dan from talking no matter how hard you try, believe me. I know this quite well, particularly 2 or 3 in the morning after a bunch of shots of tequila. Used to wind him up and let him go. But for those of you that don't know Dan, which I can't imagine that you would, Dan Kaminski is a good friend of Toorcon. He's actually top of our buddy list. So, and he's been talking with Toorcon for a long time, actually. We're particularly pleased that he's a solid presenter with us. He always takes the time out to be here for Toorcon. And he's going to be talking on his Black Ops with, I guess, pattern recognition, the Toorcon remix. So let's give a big hand for Dan Kaminski.
If you need any more, my friend, right there.
You're a sick bastard, Zane. Hi. So, we're here to break stuff. Cool. My name's Dan Kaminski. I've done like a couple books, worked at a couple companies, broke some stuff. That's about all that matters. You know, I'm really supposed to change what it says at the top of these slides. But yeah, so gold mitt. I suck. Oh, the drinks are coming. So there are actually times where I'll talk about a single subject like DNS and I'll just focus on DNS like a laser and just totally stay on that one topic. No, not this year. This year's all about ADD is useful. You get to work on like 8 things at once and then go ahead and present at the same con. So we've got lots of things to talk about. We're going to talk about network neutrality. We're going to talk about what happens when you do yet another massive internet scan and find 2 million SSL servers. We're going to talk about online banking. There's a really trivial hack against most online banking systems, actually specifically 27% of the top 50. It's just depressing that this hack exists, but potential solution for it. I kind of sort of did some patching to OpenSSH a few years back that kind of sort of left us in there. So I'm going to do a really hideous fix to fix that. But the big thing, of course, pattern recognition. Let's make some entropy recognizable. Humans are pattern recognition engines. It's kind of what we do. The degree to which we're using our human abilities for pattern recognition to actually go after code is, let's just say, a field that could be expanded. And thus achieving my, my grand goal of pretty picture. So, let's begin. Oh yeah, speaking of pretty pictures, yes, you can diff 2 files visually, visual bin diff. And I'll show you how to do that later. Okay, so we got to talk about network neutrality. You guys are a pretty cool crowd. I'm not going to go into too much of the politics. Suffice it to say, telcos are looking at traffic and going, well, we can't make more money making the network faster. Maybe we can make more money making the network slower. Yeah, there's this great quote from Comcast. To accommodate the needs of our customers who do choose to operate VPN, Comcast offers the Comcast at-home professional product. This product will cost $95 a month. I don't want to spend $1,100 a VPN into work, thank you very much. It works fine just right now. So, how do we actually find stuff that's going nasty against network neutrality? In terms of definitions, network neutrality is all about your ISP taking a look at the traffic you're moving and applying different qualities of packet transmission based on whether they actually want the packet to route or not. There's an interesting question. How do you know if your quality of service is being degraded? So I was working on something totally different. Just a random little TCP stunt. I like TCP IP. I like messing with it. And I sort of realized we could start using this for network neutrality. All right, so here's the stunt, right? TCP, standard mechanism for communicating between point A to point B with a reliable stream of packets, a reliable stream of data. TCP automatically determines the amount of available bandwidth between any 2 points. There is no communication between all the various users of the same line. What happens is when the line has too much traffic, it just drops them on the floor. And TCP's job is to detect packets being dropped on the floor and slow down. If it doesn't slow down, if no one slows down, then the line becomes useless, and that sucks. See video on internet. So dropped packets on the internet are actually a source of information about not just your own session, but about other things that are going on the channel. And so what you can actually do is, well, so here's the concept. TCP line, figure if TCP determines that a given end-to-end, hang on, let me think this out for a second. All right, you're talking with someone in Finland. They're not 1 hop away. You've got maybe 15 hops between you and Finland. What TCP is able to do is figure out, if I send packets at 1 kilobyte a second, will they get all the way there? Great. 10K, great. 20K, great. 25K, no. There's a certain amount of available from one point to an end that is basically the, you get it's the weakest chain thing, right? The maximum amount of bandwidth along the link, is constrained by the slowest link. So what you do is, I'm not saying I'm hungover from last night. I'm totally hungover from last night. Or maybe I'm like pre-hungover for tonight. Oh man. Maybe I should actually put back on the Pirate Baby thing and go sleep under the table for a bit. Okay. All right. I can do this. Professional. All right. So TCP tells you that you can only send traffic at 5 kilobytes a second. It tries to send it faster, packets drop. So what do? You send packets faster than 5 kilobytes a second. But Dan, you say, this will cause packets to drop. Yes, it will. If those packets make it all the way to the hop with the constrained bandwidth. You send 5K a second on your TCP stream. Now you start sending more traffic. On a separate, completely separate session, you start sending another 10K a second. But you only let it go 1 hop. Will it cause any traffic to drop? No, not unless the weakest link was between you and 1 hop away. So you are now sending 15K a second out of your Ethernet port, but only 5K a second all the way through the internet. 1 hop, that's still going to make it. 2 hops, 3 hops, 4 hops, 5 hops, 5 hops. Now suppose you've hit the hop with the constrained bandwidth. At 5 hops per second, TCP had detected you had 15K of capacity. You are sending, TCP had detected you had TCP detected 5K of capacity. You're sending 15. What happens? Packets drop. So what's interesting here is you're seeing this feedback on your TCP session. It is being caused by something in the TCP session. It is being caused by you sending this additional traffic. You know which hop is getting that additional traffic, and you know that it is causing failures because you're seeing it in your TCP session. What if we start injecting traffic from different locations? What if we start injecting a bunch of traffic from different IP addresses? So I have a TCP session going on, and YouTube tries to send a whole bunch more data. Will there be different reactions than if CNN starts sending a bunch of extra data? Will there be different reactions if it's a bunch of encrypted data? How do you actually do this? What does this actually look like? So this is, new slide for Toorcon, rock on. This is how you actually do this. What we're going to do is we're going to go to our random number generator. We're going to monitor how much data we can get through it. We're going to pipe it into SSH, because if you know me, everything has to work through SSH. And what we're going to do is we're going to see how fast can I send traffic to this particular host, just normal. Actually, this is, okay. So I've got some session going on, and I'm basically filling, TCP has detected a 380.3 kilobytes per second average stream. That's how much can be pushed. I have achieved TCP saturation. TCP has said if I send it any faster, things are going to die. I start sending another 100K a second. I only let it go 5 hops. It's still going at 380, 390. Now I let it go 14 hops, and it down the original session. So HPing is a very flexible tool. I can go ahead and, using the -A flag, change my source. Using the -P flag, change my port. Using the -E flag, change the file content. So essentially, I can inject a whole bunch of additional traffic and see, is it causing the drop from 390 to 188? This is actually useful if you're trying to figure out basically what you're doing is you're figuring out what the network is defining as interference. And in defining what the network is defining as interference, you're able to figure out what is what its standards are in terms of neutrality. If YouTube can get more packets through, but CNN can't, then the network is biased towards YouTube, which is actually the point I was trying to make a while ago. Here's a bit of a stunt. What if you want, so this requires saturating a line with TCP packets. Maybe you don't want to do full network saturation. Maybe there's a problem with that. Maybe you want to get better data, performance status, what's the jitter, what's the latency on packets. This is more detailed information that you can extract using the method I just described. So let me tell you what I'm actually working on. This is, I think, the first public time I'm talking about it. It turns out, I know this is shocking, Windows Media Player actually has more code in it than just DRM. I had no idea. That's all they're talking about. But no, there's actually like a full-on video infrastructure in there. So check this out. This echo is getting a little bit to me. Okay. So Windows Media Player, when you're sending video, and Real Media does the same thing. I think QuickTime has an RTP mode as well. When it's sending you video, it just does a unicast UDP stream. It just fires video packets at you. Now, what's saying earlier that if you just fire packets out, then you're just going to cause bandwidth overload, and there's no feedback, and you don't know that you're actually overloading the network, and all those kind of good things. Well, yes, that will all happen, and that is why we have another protocol called RTCP, which actually sends back jitter information and bandwidth information and allows the media playing infrastructure to figure out how much bandwidth is available. There's actually nothing that forces, this is kind of fun, there's nothing that forces the RTP stream, the RTCP stream that says quality, to go back to the same IP address that appears to be sending video. So we can have packets that appear to be coming from YouTube, appear to be coming from CNN, appear to be coming from all these places around the internet, and we're sending back performance data to Dan Kaminski. Cool. So, no, really, I'm kind of putting these guys on notice. If you're doing nasty things to filter and to provide bias towards one or the other, I'm going to find you, I'm going to bust you. So please stop. Now that we're done with that, SSL. So yeah, I have my big scanning box, and I threw it a while ago at, let's find every SSL server on the internet and say hi to it and collect its certificates. I run this system called Diluvian. It's actually really weird when you scan the internet now. It appears there's a bunch of firewalls out there with a little mess with Kaminski switch, and people are checking it off. No, you can't just send a bunch of SYNs at a whole bunch of IP addresses and expect that the boxes that speak back to you are actually there. They lie a lot. That being said, I've been trying to filter through the data I got back, and I've gotten some interesting things out of SSL servers. There are 2 basic rules for deploying SSL. SSL is supposed to give you a nice encrypted session. First of all, on the public component of an SSL cert, do not put anything you would not want to actually be public. There's a reason it's called a public key. You would think this is obvious. Gee, no one's going to go out to every IP address and look at all the certs to see what's in them. The other thing is you really can't put the same certificate in different boxes. That's because SSL doesn't have this one property called perfect forward secrecy. If box A and box B have the same private key, they can read each other's traffic. Now, this shouldn't be a problem because by crypto theory, you never move private keys. You always generate a private key on the box that's going to use it. You know, bits are cheap, as Bruce Schneier said. So this shouldn't be a problem either. No one would ever go out and look to make sure no one's been copying their keys all over the place. Actually, we did that and totally found it. Speaking of that whole public key thing, if you are the sort of site that does not want people, if you put out a honeypot, and this honeypot, its goal is to trick people into attacking it, you might not want to call it honeypot.yourcompany.com. But if you do, you might want to put that in the SSL search. It's kind of signed, "Hi, I'm the honeypot." Yeah. What about the other stuff in terms of keys leaking all over the place? Well, here's what's good. 90% of the SSL keys that I found were actually on only one box, just like the spec said. Excellent. 10% of the keys were a little more widely deployed. So widely deployed, in fact, about 1 out of 3 boxes on the internet that's hosting SSL actually has a unique key. This is called when things go bad, things go really, really bad. There's like a whole bunch of VPN concentrators and embedded devices that, well, you buy one on eBay, and then you can read all the traffic the other ones move. There's some groups that really should know better that have deployed like 10,000 machines or so. If you work at this group, yes, I'm talking to you. The absolute numbers are pretty sketchy, though. Like I said, there's a bunch of boxes that are messing with me, but there's a lot of devices out there that got sold. To their credit, there's a couple companies that are doing things correctly. I can specifically say, you know, Cisco and HP both clearly have devices that, you know, they'll have the same template, but clearly when the first time you boot up the machine, they actually generate cert at that time. So that's kind of nice. And you can just see it because they have the same template, but the keys are different. So Cisco and HP, at least for a couple of the devices, have done the right thing. A couple other devices have very, very much not. Online banking. The world's most depressing Google search is, "Why is this secure?" How about instead of telling me why is this secure, how about you actually be secure? It's depressing, you know, like 26% of the top 50 banks, they do this, "Hi, I'm going to give this to you on a web page, and it's a username, password, oh, excuse me. Here's your social security number from a couple sites." And they're not asking for it from a SSL encrypted site, no, no, no. But they are putting down a GIF of a lock. The incredible thing is, you know, they paid some absurd amount of money for this collection of pixels. Everyone does the same thing. It's hilarious. Why is this the case? Why aren't they... so the reason this is insecure, of course, to get any of these logins over HTTP, the idea is that they post to HTTPS. If there is no bad guy, you will indeed securely log into the website. In the absence of an attacker, you are safe. Okay, in the absence of the attacker, you are already safe. The whole point of security is secure in the face of an attacker. So why aren't they just encrypting every single connection to the bank website? Well, there are a few banks that do. Wells Fargo comes to mind. As soon as you go to wellsfargo.com, bam, you are instantly moved to an HTTPS site. Why doesn't every bank do this? Don't they have all the money in the world? Well, you know what? It is a pain in the ass. It is expensive. It is not very scalable to have every single access to your website come in over SSL. Security people believe that it is. We're wrong. It sucks. SSL hardware does not scale worth anything. And so basically, the perf guys say, you know what, we're just not going to have every link be SSL, sorry. There's another possibility, and this is done about 50% of the time. This is actually really common. Or what they do, actually I need a clock on me because I was spending a little bit more time here. 12:48, I'm doing just fine then. So here's another option. There are a bunch of banks that do that. When you go to their homepage, what they show you is not here's username, here's password. Instead, they say, please click here and we'll let you log in. We'll move you to a site now that will let you log in. This works. Lots of banks do it. Here's the problem. The UI guys veto it. They say if you don't give people a username and password prompt on every single page, either A, they don't know online banking exists, or B, they're not being told to go ahead and use it and stop calling us on the frickin' phone. Your bank does not want to talk to you. They want nothing to do with you. They want your money, and they want you to come into their computers and tell them what to do with it. They don't want to talk to you because that's expensive. So the UI people say if we go ahead and we don't have this form on the front page, people aren't going to use online banking. We're going to have to spend more money talking to them on the phone. So the perf guys vetoed always be secure with SSL. The UI guys vetoed go into a second page. And so you have the third option, which is crap. And the security guys lose. Security people do actually lose if they don't be realistic about what's going on and about what people's requirements are. So here's a question. Can we make everyone happy? Can the user interface guys be happy? Can the perf guys be happy? And shockingly enough, can security be happy too? The answer is yes. So here's what we're going to do. Web pages are not actually static. These are not, like PDF. No, PDF's a bad example, but they're not like a sheet of paper. They're actually little programs. You can throw JavaScript in there. They can recode themselves in response to user input. Now, there's a mechanism in HTML called iframe, which is basically putting a mini window of another site inside of a page. Now, it's well known that you can use iframes to pre-cache an entire web page. Like, if you know click from page A to page B, while they're viewing page A, you can have a miniature iframe load up page B. So as soon as they click, it goes to the cache contents, pulls it out of the web cache. Great, wonderful. What wasn't very well realized is that you can actually put an SSL site into an iframe. So you go to a website, and it will, in the background, even though it's an HTTP link, it will, in the background, start up the SSL session, start downloading, start caching, all while you're browsing normally. You can actually do this. So here's what you do. Here's how you combine these two things. Conceivably, the username on a banking site is not particularly private information. If it is, then it shouldn't be in plain text. It should be X'd out in case you're, in some place someone can look over your shoulder. While the user is typing in their username, the web page can, because it's dynamic, because it's not static, because it can recode itself, the web page can actually go ahead and insert an iframe while typing name to receive that causes the page to start up the SSL session. And when the user goes to type in the password, they're just instantly moved over to SSL then. Now, this has actually been implemented. The way it ends up looking is you type in your username, and as soon as you start typing, I have this iframe coming up over SSL from Yahoo. Yahoo is actually another site that messes this up. The online banking guys I can understand because, tech really isn't their thing. But come on, it's freaking Yahoo. They should know better. So the idea is you need to log into something. You start typing in your username. As soon as ABCD went in, as soon as literally I hit the first character, it spawned this iframe. And then the moment I go ahead to actually click on password, it actually doesn't let me insert any text. It goes, this is not a safe place for text to be inserted. It moves me over to SSL. Look like in code, it's really straightforward. It's just a form that has a on focus. As soon as the password gets the focus, it moves the location over to the HTTPS site. It's actually fairly elegant. So perf is happy, UI is happy, and dear God, we're actually not being ridiculously insecure. Woot. So as long as we're talking about bugs in crypto systems, 2001, one of the things I found out is that SSH can be used to do kind of a poor man's VPN. SSH is traditionally a system for getting a shell on a remote machine, a command prompt. And they had a little bit of functionality that said, oh, if I've got some web server running on here, or I've got an email server, we can do something called port forwarding. But I want you to say, when you do the initial connection, what all your port forwards are going to be. And so people would have these horrible scripts and would try to map these things. It was such a pain in the ass to manage. And I was like, wouldn't it be nice if every time we needed a port forwarding, we could just say, okay, this time I wanted to go here, this time I wanted to go here. Well, it turns out there was a protocol already supported in all the web browsers and all the various tools called SOCKS. And SOCKS let you declare to SSH, hey, I'm going to connect to the machine over there, and I'm going to go ahead and connect on this port, and I want to go to Yahoo. I want to go to CNN. And I want it to work, same connection, same syntax. In fact, I want it to be like I'm sitting on that network over there. And this is great, and this is wonderful, and there's a little tiny problem. You see, a few years after I did SSH, I did some DNS research. And DNS, of course, is what you use to convert from yahoo.com to some IP address. Well, when you're using SOCKS, at least SOCKS 4, what you do is locally, you say, hey, what is the number for Yahoo? And then you take that number and you remotely go over the SSH link and you go places. What was it about earlier about being, security when there is no attacker is not that useful? You want security when there is an attacker. An attacker can actually, on the local link, hijack your outbound DNS. And even though your packets are going out over some foreign link, locally the bad guys can redirect how things go foreign. So we need to get DNS to happen remotely. About a year and a half ago, I got SSH to support the SOCKS 5 protocol, which does indeed getting the remote host to do all your addressing for you. The problem is that the browsers, Mozilla does actually support SOCKS 5 through a hidden setting. Thank you. Internet Explorer, not so much. We'll leave it at that. Is it possible for us, even for these clients that aren't supporting SOCKS 5, is it possible for us to suppress the leakage of DNS data? Yeah. So, SSH. Okay, so I was talking earlier about TCP, right? TCP being our standard way of doing a reliable communication from point A to point B with bandwidth and all the other stuff handled. DNS does not go over TCP, normally. Normally, DNS goes over UDP. UDP is basically, I fire a packet and forget about it, and oh, maybe something will come back later. We could put a UDP to TCP translation layer in SSH that just handled DNS, and then, write all this code, and then be a whole bunch. Or, it turns out, for various obscure reasons, DNS actually does run over TCP as well. It needs to get back a packet that says, yeah, I know you tried to do that over UDP, but no, you better retry that over TCP. So if you actually put up a fake server that sets what's called the truncation bit, and you have it respond to every request with the truncation bit set, your client stack will actually retry over TCP. And now you can go ahead and move DNS great. There is and this is a general purpose strategy. It works for SSH. It will work for Tor. It'll work for everything. It stops DNS leakage. There's a little bit of a problem. So in 2004, so this is DNS over SSH. I already did SSH over DNS. That means I have DNS over SSH over DNS. Yes, I have finally implemented DNS over DNS. Malkovich. For committing such a sin, I believe this is Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Mickey's. I'm going to go crawl under this table. Holy crap. Actually, it's pretty good now that I think about it. Yeah, you got to get that Cinnamon Toast Crunch aftertaste in. Then it's rocking. All right. Thanks to Zane Lackey. He thought I wouldn't. So, more bugs. More stuff with SSH. You log into a box. Haven't logged into this particular box before. And it says to you, I don't recognize the key fingerprint of this box. Do you recognize 09B199841777DB8? What the hell? Is there anyone in this room who's going to remember this? Really, I'll quiz you on it later. I will buy all your drinks for the night if you can remember that in 3 hours without writing it down right now. So, now according to the design for SSH, yeah, you are actually supposed to recognize this hideous blob of hex. And you're supposed to reject it if it looks unfamiliar. I mean, I'm serious. They will tell you this with a straight face. So there's something called the 2 billion SSH key attack. The hacking group ADM came up with it. And it's very simple. They generate 2 billion keys and spoof the key that looks the most similar. And it works like a freaking charm. We need something better. So, funny little research field called cryptonamonics. Why have I called it that? Because the name is awesome. So, cryptonamonics. There are the study of remembering crazy crypto crap. All right. So there's 3 classes of human memory, at least to the degree that's useful in cryptography. Rejection. I've never seen that before. Like, I've never seen 09A9B1, yes or no. Recognition. It's that one, not the other one. I've definitely been drinking that. I should have been drinking that. And then there's recollection. Let me describe to you the Mickeys and I'm having trouble recollecting Cinnamon Toast Crunch. All right. So all SSH requires out of us for this particular use is rejection. All we need to be able to say is that string of hex is not it's not the string of hex you're looking for. Hex is a total failure. So what else do we have available? Well, there have been some other attempts, using abstract art patterns. There's actually a really cool thing called passfaces that got used. And the idea is that you would recognize, oh, yeah, it's this blob of pixels, or, that's sort of okay. But these faces, the face stuff actually works really well. We have hardware acceleration to deal with human faces. Great stuff. It actually is very interesting. You can get a very specific form of brain damage, and then you just can't recognize faces. Everyone looks like they have the same face. That's that hardware dying, actually. The problem is that the amount of entropy we get out of these systems is pretty low. Let's say you have this grid of 9 faces, and you have to match 5 of them. So you have to match the right face. I recognize that girl, and that guy, that girl. Yeah, you only get like 59,000 possibilities there. That's less than 16 bits of entropy. This is fine. This is great for an online authentication system, which is, of course, what Passface is built. It doesn't at all work for offline. So I couldn't go and, represent this sequence of characters as a bunch of faces and expect anything to work out of it. It just wouldn't work. That instead of making 2 billion SSH keys, I'm going to make 59,000. It's going to take too long. So we need better than that. So humans don't remember arbitrary strings of characters effectively. We know this, right? We do remember stories. Homer's Iliad has a ridiculous amount of entropy in it in terms of what we remember from these stories passed down through eras and eras and eras. However, stories have a very unique element to them. They kind of sort of change over time. Things get added, things get removed, things get forgotten, things get inserted. The most stable element of a story are the names of the participants. Humans have a ridiculous amount of memory for human names. This is just, it's part of our acceleration. What if we turn these hideous sequence of bytes into a series of human names? So what I did, this is bizarre, but it does work. Take this data. Notice that there's a little bit more unique female names than male names, way more last names than either. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 512 male names, 1,024 female names, and 8,192 last names. That's going to be 9 bits of entropy, 10 bits of entropy, and 13 bits of entropy. Sum 32 bits. We are going to pick these names according to names that are the most different as possible. Bob and Bobby are very similar. Remembering the difference between the two is kind of hard. Bob and Jim, much different. So what we want to do is we want to try to calculate the greatest differences between all the names, because we want you to be able to recognize the difference between Bob and Jim. And what we're going to use is something as an edit distance metric, like Python's Levenshtein algorithm. Or it's not from Python, but it's implemented in Python. And we're going to try to prevent two names from looking or sounding similar. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that big blob of hex and we're going to represent it as a series of names. And it will actually, this has actually been implemented. it ends up looking like that big blob you saw earlier became Julio and Epifania Dezudi, Luther and Roland Dornbos, Manuel and Twyla Imbesi. Now, you'd say, this is a lot of names to remember. It turns out you don't have to recollect them off the top of your head. You just need to see them and go, oh yeah, I've seen that name before. This works. You need to see them every single time. They can't just pop up like, oh, have you ever seen this before? And it's only showing up when there's a problem. No, you need to see it every time you log into a box. But if you see these names every time you log into a box, you actually start associating these people with the box you're trying to log into. It works.
Are we as good at remembering the order that those 5 sets of names come in?
Excellent question. Here, grab a beer. Dealing with order problems sucks. What's interesting is I'm estimating about maybe 8 to 10 bits of rot from the fact that Julio might be at the top or might be at the bottom. Julio might actually be married to Roland instead of Epifania, things like that. So there is actual potential for shuffling. So I wouldn't want to see this for really, really, really short hashes. The point is with hashing algorithms that you have so much extra capacity. Now, it is possible, and this is going off on a bit of a tangent, but it is an awesome question because it's totally what I've been looking at. It is possible to actually embed additional bits. So there'd be yet another series of names that's just there to handle the fact that there's bit rot. Say there was a 6th couple that was added. That was just basically a hash of the particular orderings of the rest. You'd have 160 bits. And then the fact that the human brain can shuffle them a bit, you add extra bits to compensate based on what we do or don't pay attention to. That may actually be useful to do. This is also new for Toorcon. Name-based passwords. How many people here have ever had to log in where you actually have to have password standards and they have to meet certain entropy requirements? Awesome. How many people here have ever had a password like lowercase a, lowercase l, 7, $1, 3, lowercase n, uppercase m? Okay, these are a pain in the ass. You end up with things like 23 syllables, and you have to describe them slowly, and there's typos, and you're screwed. Oh yeah, there's a bug in the slide. Have a beer. What if, instead, you typed Dirk and Kolapagio, Omar and Gina Heimel? Okay, so you're typing a heck of a lot more. You get more entropy, because in this case, in the previous example, we had 48 bits of entropy. These two names give you 60. You have more entropy, less syllables to describe it, and you have the possibility for spell check while typing in a password. I'm not convinced this is going to be a better way to log into systems, but if you actually have a high security environment that requires you to have 64 bits of entropy in your password, this may be a better way to do it. And the really cool thing is this can be entirely client-side. You could potentially map an arbitrary password, just your client will convert Dirk and Kook to 7 AL 7 whatever. Go ahead.
Have a beer?
Yes. That works well once. I have 1 beer left.
L isn't X. Huh? L isn't X.
No, it's not. But if you consider A through Z, lowercase, A through Z, uppercase, 0, 9, and a group of, what's it called? And a group of the most common punctuation, you end up with about 64 combinations. So what you could do is, you could basically just write a mapping function between the characters that actually get used in passwords, even for secure passwords, and Dirk and Kolapagio. Then what you'd have is say, one of the characters is basically an escape bit, where it's, hey, guess what? Some jackass used a piece of the password that we couldn't represent in the normal 64, and here now we're going to put in the raw ASCII code. What it is that you take your arbitrary plaintext password and you just map the characters to a sequence of bits, and then that sequence of bits gets remapped to names. Does that make sense? All right, go ahead.
We did something like this for passphrase encrypted hard drives. We actually then wrote the tool because we forgot the passphrase. We wrote a tool based on which to go through and attack our passphrase. And we use that, so we defeated a system similar to this.
The problem with passphrases is their entropy sucks. You know, if you go ahead and the idea is you're still taking 64 bits out of a random number generator. Passphrases, even because English is incredibly patterned, right? So you got 1.3 on a passphrase. You basically are talking about sentences, meaning you only hit 1.3 characters per 1.3 bits of entropy per character. So, I mean, that's the average for English. So let's say you have a 40-character passphrase. You're still only talking about 50 bits of entropy, 52-ish. Most passphrases aren't even 40 characters. Most of them that I've seen are something like 20. So you're talking like 30 bits. So your passphrase breaking was based on the fact that people select crappy passphrases. And the reason people select crappy passphrases is because that's all they can remember. Normal sentence recollection is pretty weak, just like talking about with storytelling. Our ability to remember the precise details of stories is pretty weak. But we have hardware acceleration for names. And so because you have hardware acceleration of theory, and this actually does require, you know, a greater sample size than my head, the theory is that that our capacity should be much larger for these. Go ahead.
There's actually a site that I can't quite remember the full URL or whatever it's called, but it's called Diceware, and it actually, have you heard about that?
They're using words out of dictionary as an entropy source, right?
And just English words that are actually numbered, like 1 through 6 and 8. You use dice. And yeah.
Very interesting you bring that up. How many people here go around saying car, boat, Jack, Bob, Timmy? With the exception of Timmy. The problem with Diceware is humans don't go around saying random words. And so we don't have the actual mental connections set up to have us remember random sequences of words. Humans speak in sentences. We we converse. The only time we actually communicate in an element that has an enormous amount of entropy on a person is actually names. I mean, look, we have 32 bits of entropy contained in 3 names here. Now, you can go ahead and I submit to you it is easier to remember Omar and Gina Heimel than it is to remember Automobile, Timmy, and Fu. Am I wrong? Possibly. But my gut check is that we have more names than we do to remember, because there's no... The interesting thing about this approach is that you're actually using existing knowledge bases. We know that people with a first name also have a last name. On a slightly more culturally interesting level, we know that people tend to aggregate in terms of couples.
Attack based on the pattern, the set of last names is always going to be in a given position in the phrase.
So the position is there shouldn't be. What do you mean?
You've got a limited number of male first names. They're always, Dirk is always going to be in a position where the male names are right. Or do you mix them up?
Oh, so the concept is it's a straight bit mapping. So you take your signal, 160 arbitrary bits, and in this case, from SSH, we are talking about theoretic. It's coming out of a hash function, so they should be completely random. And then it's like a structure overlay. You take the 9 bits, and it's like the first 9 bits are always a male name. The next 10 bits are always a female name. The next 13 bits are always a last name. So because of that, the structure is there only for us, basically. It's only for the fact that we were, And in fact, that's actually an interesting observation. In cultures where last names come before first names, this would probably need to be reordered in some manner. Because there are actually many cultures, as far as I know, there are many cultures where you use your family name first, And in those ones, you might want to actually flip the order around. But the actual order of names is just there to be compatible with the wetware already in our heads. And this is awesome. These are the best questions I've had on this stuff. So thank you. Go on. Continue.
Similar last names, or last names that, just, develop whole families.
So this is actually an interesting thing. The census data is useful in that we have America ends up absorbing names from large numbers of regions. And so, if you look at the names that I got, it was basically, the only standard that I chose was, does this name not sound like that name? In environments where there's less entropy in names, this mechanism may not work as well. I make no pretending that this is a culturally sensitive representation system. The nice thing about being a geek is I don't actually need to worry about that. Oh, now I'm doomed because I'm seeing Mike. Uh-oh, hit me.
So, from this, are we to believe that your stance is you believe a password is one man plus one woman?
I'm using married couples to represent SSH keys. My belief in the sanctity of marriage is not actually high. All right, we got anything else? All right, cool. What's up? What's that say? 15 minutes? Oh, man, I'm going really slow. All right. So, speaking of broken representation... Oh, man, I'm going really slow here. All right. Speaking of broken representations of entropy, if you look at a hex dump of some crap, guess what? That's useless. It's just as useless here. I'm going to use od-tx1. Show me a file in bytes. It's like, well, it tells me I have a run of zeros. Thank you. That's not that useful. There's got to be a better way to represent the kind of complex signals that, let's be honest, we have to fuzz all the time now. There are two ways we do fuzzing. Fuzzing being random changes to a file to try to find bugs in a parser. One way is take a file, bits, see what happens. I have no idea what's going on. I know it's a file. I know I can flip some bits. The other is smart fuzzing. Take a file, understand all the crazy crap that's inside, fuzz the structure, and see what happens. The problem is that smart fuzzing works a lot better, but it requires smart people to drive it, and smart people are hard to find. Dumb fuzzing doesn't require any smart people. Unfortunately, dumb fuzzing is pretty dumb. There's a reason it's called dumb, because it's dumb. Can we increase the intelligence of fuzzers to some degree? Well, there's this thing that'll find structure in anything, and it's called sequitur. Sequitur is a linear time pattern finder. It creates hierarchical context-free grammars from arbitrary input. That's the geek description. The straightforward description is, here's some code. Switch statement, case 1, value 2. Case 2, value 3. Case 3, value 4. Case 4, value 5. I think there's some repeated stuff in there. And there is. We've got case, we've got value. So we're going to turn this into switch C, symbol A1, symbol B2, symbol A2, symbol B3. And this is going to basically take us from a sequence of bytes to a sequence of symbols. The algorithm that actually does this work is called sequitur. It was created by Craig Neville Manning as his PhD thesis about 10 years ago. When I did this work, I did not realize he was the chief research scientist at Google. So that whole don't be evil thing, yeah, that's okay, I'll do it. Trivial algorithm. What we're going to do is we're going to compress, say, some arbitrary files. In this case, this is Win32 code. And we are going to look for patterns. Now, because it's a hierarchical pattern, so A could contain B, B can contain C, and so on, we are going to color each byte according to how many symbol depth, how far we had to go to recover each individual byte. And so what do we get? Now, the last time I did this talk, you couldn't see crap. What I did was I actually took those images, which is just a hex dump. Each byte is colored by how deep I had to go to recover the byte, with it starting at blue and ending at white. What you end up seeing is actual blobs form in the data, as you have repeated sections that you constantly have to go the same amount of depth to recover. So with no knowledge, I'm actually finding structure offsets and structure forms. It's kind of nice. Can we for fun? Well, I'm creating a tool called the CFG 9000. It's a little bit of a smarter dumb fuzzer. All right, so we've got these symbols here, right? And if you actually do a graph here, you get this really nice graph that's very nice and elegant. What if instead of fuzzing at the level of individual characters, what if we fuzz at the level of symbols? So we're going to turn, having two cases, CCC, ASC, we have case, case, case. So we basically batch up the data by the amount of chunks that it took, by the chunks that Sequitur finds. So that's what the CFG 9000 does. It gets you a bunch of symbols, it shuffles, it drops, it repeats, and so on. And what happens when you actually do this? Well, here's what you see when you run it on code. It actually finds that this P arrow rule is a symbol, and it'll go ahead and repeat it, or it'll go ahead and drop it. Can we run this on graphics formats? So I did try this I should actually go ahead and try this on some real images. And yeah, this thing's actually breaking JPEG. And it's breaking it in some way that is at least good enough for the parser to recognize there's something there, but bad enough that it's actually corrupting it in random and broken ways. So the mechanism actually is successful in constructing valid but broken data. In other words, it'll still make it through the parser, but it won't look very good. To do, create a better version of Sequitur that's actually optimized for this stuff, eliminate redundant symbols. It's cool, but it's not yet where we need it. What do we actually, what's another approach? So, there's something called dot plots, right? Dot plots, I remembered actually from a completely different realm. There's a paper called Visualizing Music and Audio Similarity. It was done by a guy named John Foote over at Xerox. The basic idea is you split a song up into little tiny chunks, and then you compare the chunks to each other and figure out if they sound the same. If they sound identical, you put down a white pixel. If they sound different, you put down a black one. So this was actually run on a track from the Beatles. And yeah, this actually worked. Here's the intro, here's the verses, and on the actual slide, I don't know how well you can see it up there, but the sections actually visually do, when you see them, they look different as you traverse from the bridges to the verses and so on. So if this is finding structure in audio, of course music being incredibly patterned, what about code? Can we do the same stuff there? So I ran this on the Pirate Baby MPEG that I was running at the beginning here. Anyone here know how hideous the MPEG format is? It's like header inside a subsequence, inside of frame, inside a macro block. Oh, it's ridiculous. I don't know MPEG that well. But you know what? I can certainly see header, 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 header. Each of these white blobs is a header, basically. And with no knowledge of the protocol, this is actually doing segmentation. So what exactly is happening here? Concrete terms. Let's take Shakespeare. To be or not to be. If you take to be or not to be and you take it horizontally, you take thing and you take it vertically. And you basically put a dot whenever the word is the same. Well, obviously you're getting this big diagonal line down here, just like big diagonal line down here. But you also get repeats, because the to be at the beginning is repeated with the to be at the end. And so you'll get a diagonal repeated. This is from John Hellman's paper, which is really, really good. So this stuff is actually, I'm not just pulling it out as like, wow, this for code. Turns out the bioinformatics guys were the first to really realize, we're looking at a file format even more hideous than what's coming out of your computer. We're looking at the human genome. Let's find some patterns in it. They actually did a lot of this work first, but it turns out that it works really well on code. What could we possibly want out of these images? Well, without having to know anything about the file formats, we want to know section boundaries. I want to know, I may not know anything about MPEG, but I know that this block, that this sequence of bytes right here is different than this sequence of bytes down here. That there's a different statistical profile, that there's a different nature. And that if I'm going to do fuzzing, I'm going to fuzz each of these blocks one at a time. Because I want to reach different chunks of the underlying code, and the best way to do that is to break only one thing at a time. The other thing I'd like to do, of course, is to get some view of exactly what's going on. I mean, if I can look at a given pattern and say, oh, this looks like, maybe I can get some more data. So what if I try this on various other file formats, like Java class files, like .NET assemblies, CNN's homepage, HTML being much more dense and much more internally repeating because HTML is so redundant, looks rather different than a .NET assembly. Packet traces. I look at file formats as basically, imagine you had a bunch of packets and couldn't tell where one stopped and another began. Welcome to file formats, they suck. x86 code. Like I told you, we can run this on chromosomes. Nintendo games. Okay, I know crap about 6502 assembly, but I can at least tell you there's one thing here, there's one thing here, there's one thing here. So, I'm actually releasing a tool, it's called Hardcore, and it calculates these images. Kind of cool, IMAX style, you end up doing hacking at 100 megapixel. Nothing says awesome like 100K pixels by 100K pixels. The global goal is clearly achieved. We can certainly separate a file out into individual subchunks. Can we figure out what's going on based on what those subchunks look like? Well, we know from the paper that I showed you earlier, there's all these various shapes that do show up in real data when you're looking at words. This is what the game was doing originally. You can find palindromatic sections, so you can find like, this same thing as A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I, and then I, H, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. And then it shows up as a big X. Not much in there that describes this level of patterns. I don't know what the hell's going on here. But that's very interesting. It's very nice to have a tool that is showing you more complexity than you were prepared to parse. And all I can say is, this confused the heck out of me, but it confuses the heck out of me in a far different way than a random hex dump does. All hex dumps look the same to me. I'm not built to look at hex. But I can tell you, this is not this, is not this. And in fact, I can tell you that this is from a font file format. And if I look at anything that looks like this, I will be able to say, that's a font, because it has that font effect going on. So that's actually kind of cool. There's a lot more research to do. But this out. As a lark, I figured, originally we're taking the same file and comparing it against itself. What if we took a file and compared it to an older version of itself? Well, now things aren't identical, but they're not actually different either. There's a lot of similarities. So before, because the first block is always the same as the first block, the second block is always the same as the second block, you'd always have this hard diagonal line. Now, because it's different versions, it still shows up, but it moves around, it changes angle. Basically, you can visually trace out where things get inserted and where things get deleted based on where that previously solid line shows up. It works. I don't know if it should work, but it totally does. That's kind of fun. And yeah, this is like the MS Visual Studio Visual C runtime from 7.0 to 7.1. Mostly the same. I think there's some new code right there because there's a big old gap. New stuff. Well, color. Color's always good. Color's pretty pictures. Pretty pictures are kind of the goal. It turns out there's a library out there called Symmetrics, and Symmetrics lets us go ahead and use all these various standards, a lot of them from the bioinformatics world, to get similarities. If you take one and put it in the red channel, another in the green channel, another in the blue channel, the standards will disagree, and thus you will get pretty pictures. There's another hack that I did. This hack involves a new layout format, and this will be, I think, the last thing I have time to show you, calling it a tilt-shifted dot plot. In a normal dot plot, X and Y are both the absolute value inside of a file. So you get basically all your information streaming diagonally. Most of our image viewers aren't really optimized for diagonal image display. So what I created is a new thing called a tilt-shift dot plot. As you go down in the file, it's still, you're still advancing throughout the file. But if you go horizontal, it's actually just looking back. Now, this view is actually interesting for two things. First of all, it's streamable. It'll actually show you, you can stream data in. It'll go line by line as it's generated. And second, it's really compatible with existing viewers. So hang on a second. Let me pull up an image here. I think it's in my documents, actually. Yeah, it is. All right. So This is going to take a little while to load because it's like 260 meg PNG. What could possibly go wrong? All right. So this is shell32.dll. This thing is enormous. I have no idea what kind of crap they've thrown in here. But I actually know the guy. I should probably apologize to him for that. So I can actually scroll through this file, see all sorts of interesting internal structure. You say, oh yeah, this is messy. This is probably code, and hang on a second, and whoa, we're including some other crap. These patterns just show up. What do they? I don't necessarily know what they mean yet, but it is actually interesting to be able to see so much complexity inside of a file format, and at least be able to get some more meaningful representation of data than, say, hex dump, which is useless. So, in summary, network neutrality is under threat, but I'm working on it. Check your SSL devices. Complain to your online banks if they have those really dumb forms. Don't drink Mickey's and Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Stop expecting your users to do anything with hex. It's mostly useless. Fuzz your file formats, because we're breaking the crap out of everything, and I mean everything that isn't specifically tested against fuzzing. Oh, and take a look at. You might be surprised what you find. That's what I got. And I actually ended on time. Any questions? Go ahead.
Regards to visual organization stuff, I think you should just be wary of seeing patterns where they don't actually exist. I mean, obviously some of this stuff really does have patterns, but I think the first slide you showed was the kind of fuzzy color X stuff.
Here's my basic standard, right? If it shows you a pattern, I would definitely random and throw that. So, I mean, that's the thing, right? If you know most code is actually pattern. Because, I mean, I look how good process. So, most software is very pattern data. So what things become interesting is, are we actually finding anything in bio not successful? From what I know from the biologist, there is a fair amount of patterns, especially in